For the past 20 years, I have watched a quiet mistake play out at the dinner tables of my patients over 60. They hear the words type 2 diabetes, and the very first thing they do is open the refrigerator and throw out every block of cheese on the shelf. They believe cheese is dangerous. They believe saturated fat is the enemy. And so they walk away from one of the most powerful blood sugar allies their body could actually use. I want to say this to you clearly. Cheese, when it is the right kind and the right amount, does not raise your blood sugar. In fact, certain cheeses can slow down sugar absorption from the rest of your meal, support the cells in your pancreas that still make insulin, and quietly lower your long-term risk of complications. This is not opinion. This is what the biochemistry shows. Today, I want to walk you through 5 cheeses I personally recommend to my patients with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. For each one, I will tell you exactly what is happening inside your body when you eat it, how much is safe, and what to eat it with. And pay close attention when I get to number 1 because most people only sprinkle it on pasta, never realizing it carries the highest level of one particular vitamin tied directly to how your pancreas releases insulin. Before we go any further, do me a small favor. Drop your age in the comments and tell me which cheese is sitting in your refrigerator right now, or whether you stopped eating cheese altogether after your diagnosis. I read every single comment, and your answers shape what I cover next. Now, there is something about cheese and blood sugar that almost no one explains correctly, and it can completely change how you interpret your glucose readings. Cheese has a glycemic index of essentially 0. That part is true, but the story does not end there. Roughly 30 to 60% of the protein in cheese can be slowly converted into glucose by your liver through a process called gluconeogenesis about 3 hours after you eat it. The fat in cheese can also produce a small delayed effect on your blood sugar somewhere between 4 and 6 hours later. This effect is much smaller and much slower than what carbohydrates do, but it is real. Think of it this way. A slice of bread is like throwing gasoline on a fire. The flame jumps fast and falls fast. A serving of cheese is more like a small ember in a wood stove. It does not flare. It glows quietly for hours. If you only check your blood sugar 1 hour after eating cheese, you will see a perfectly normal number and assume cheese did nothing at all. But if you measured again at the 3 or 4 hour mark, you might see a gentle rise. You did not expect. The cheese is not betraying you. You are simply measuring at the wrong moment. This is why portion matters more than people realize. 1 to 2 thin slices of a firm cheese, or 2 to 4 tablespoons of ricotta or cottage cheese is the sweet spot. At that amount, the protein and fat actually slow down gastric emptying and stimulate GLP-1, the same incretin hormone that medications like semaglutide work on. In other words, the right portion of cheese protects your blood sugar from the rest of your meal. The wrong portion quietly works against you. A large analysis published in the journal Nutrition and Diabetes looking at data from more than 16,000 adults found that regular consumption of cheese and yogurt was associated with a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So, with that lens in place, let me start the countdown. I am going from number 5 down to number 1 because the most surprising cheese on this list is the one I want to leave you with at the end. Number 5 on my list is fresh mozzarella. And I am starting here because it is one of the most accessible cheeses in any American grocery store, which means you can put this advice into practice tomorrow morning without hunting down anything specialty. In 100 grams of fresh mozzarella, you get about 18 grams of high-quality protein, virtually 0 carbohydrate, and a moderate fat content that is noticeably lower than aged hard cheeses. But the real reason fresh mozzarella earns its place on this list is not just its protein. It is what it does for your gut. Fresh mozzarella is a naturally fermented cheese. It contains live bacterial cultures that act as mild probiotics inside your digestive tract. And here is where it matters for blood sugar. Over the past decade, the connection between your gut microbiome and your insulin sensitivity has become one of the most active areas of research in metabolic medicine. A balanced, diverse microbiome produces compounds called short-chain fatty acids, including one named butyrate, which has been shown to directly support the function of the beta cells in your pancreas, the same cells that produce insulin. A healthy microbiome also dampens the low-grade chronic inflammation that quietly feeds insulin resistance, especially in adults over 60. Let me tell you about Kathleen, 67 years old, who came to me with an HbA1c of 7.2. She had cut every dairy product out of her kitchen for almost 3 years because someone told her saturated fat would make her diabetes worse. She was exhausted, hungry between meals, and her numbers were not improving. I asked her to do one small thing: add 50 to 80 grams of fresh mozzarella to her lunch 4 times a week, paired with tomato, basil, and a drizzle of olive oil, the classic Capri. 3 months later, her HbA1c came down to 6.5, and she told me the afternoon sugar cravings had quietly disappeared. One word of caution: sodium content in fresh mozzarella varies a lot between brands. If you also have high blood pressure, read the label and look for a low sodium version. And if you can find fresh mozzarella DUFA made from buffalo milk, the fatty acid profile is even more favorable. What you want to avoid is the rubbery, shrink-wrapped string cheese marketed to children. That is a different product entirely with very little of the protective benefit I just described. So that is number 5. But let me move you to number 4, because this next one is even easier to find, and gram for gram, it is one of the leanest protein options I can put on your plate. Number 4 is cottage cheese. And I want you to pay attention to something most people miss about this one. Cottage cheese does not protect your blood sugar, mainly through what it does inside your bloodstream. It protects your blood sugar through what it stops you from doing 2 hours later. Let me explain. In 100 grams of cottage cheese, you get roughly 98 calories, 11 to 12 grams of protein, and fewer than 4 grams of carbohydrate. Gram for gram, it is one of the highest protein to calorie dairy options you can buy in any American supermarket. And when you eat that much protein in such a small amount of calories, your body releases satiety hormones including PY and cholecystoin, which keep your appetite quiet for the next 3 to 4 hours. For a person over 60 managing blood sugar, that is enormous. Because the truth is, most blood sugar damage does not come from the meal in front of you. It comes from the cookies, the crackers, the handful of pretzels at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when hunger sneaks up and you grab the first thing in the pantry. Cottage cheese at breakfast or as a mid-morning snack quietly shuts that door. There is a second benefit working in the background. Cottage cheese is naturally rich in calcium, and meta-analyses published in journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition have consistently shown that adequate dietary calcium intake is associated with improved insulin sensitivity over time. This is not a dramatic overnight effect. It is a slow, steady contribution that builds month after month. One trap I see all the time at the dairy aisle: plain cottage cheese is a friend. Cottage cheese mixed with pineapple chunks or peaches floating in syrup is not. That sweetened version can have 18 to 20 grams of added sugar per cup, which completely cancels every benefit I just described. Read the label. If you see syrup, sugar, or fruit juice concentrate, put it back. Use cottage cheese plain at breakfast with strawberries or kiwi as a spread on whole grain toast instead of cream cheese, or as a base for a dip with herbs and lemon. And while we are here, let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually checked your blood sugar 3 hours after a cheese-heavy meal, not just 1 hour? Tell me in the comments. Most of my patients have never been told to measure at that window, and it changes everything. Number 3 takes us across the Mediterranean, and this one carries a fat the rest of this list does not have. Number 3 on my list is feta. And the reason feta deserves a spot here has nothing to do with what most people think of when they hear the word. It has to do with the kind of milk it comes from, and the very specific type of fat inside that milk. Authentic Greek feta, the kind protected under European Union law, must be made from sheep's milk or a blend of sheep and goat milk. That detail matters more than you might guess. Sheep's milk contains noticeably higher concentrations of a particular fatty acid called conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, than cow's milk does. And CLA has shown up in study after study as a fat associated with improved insulin sensitivity, and more importantly, for my patients over 60, with a reduction in visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that wraps itself silently around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. It is not the fat you can pinch at your waistline. It is hidden, and it is the most metabolically dangerous fat in the human body. I often describe it to my patients as a thick layer of grease that is built up around the engine of a car. From the outside, the car looks fine, but under the hood, every part is working harder, running hotter, and wearing out faster. That is exactly what visceral fat does to your pancreas and liver, and it is one of the strongest drivers of insulin resistance in older adults. In 100 grams of authentic feta, you get about 14 grams of protein and less than 4 grams of carbohydrate. It is also a fermented cheese, which means it contributes the same kind of beneficial bacteria to your gut that I described with mozzarella. Now, 2 warnings. First, there is a difference between authentic Greek feta and the American-style feta sold in plastic tubs in many supermarkets. American-style feta is often made from cow's milk and does not carry the same CLA profile. Look for the words "made from sheep's milk" on the label. Second, feta is salty by design since it is preserved in brine. If you have high blood pressure, rinse it briefly under cold water before using. That simple step can cut the sodium content by roughly a third. Crumble it over a Greek salad with cucumber, olives, and olive oil. Use it as a filling in a spinach omelet. Sprinkle it over roasted vegetables. Now we are at number 2. And this is the cheese I tell my patients to keep in their refrigerator at all times. Number 2 on my list is ricotta. And ricotta earns this position because of a quiet biochemical fact that almost no one with diabetes has ever been told. Most cheeses you buy are made from the solid curds of milk. Ricotta is different. Ricotta is made from the whey, the liquid that is left over when other cheeses are produced. That single difference changes everything about what ricotta does inside your body. The protein in ricotta is whey protein, the same protein sold in expensive tubs at fitness stores. The protein in most other cheeses is casein. They look the same on a nutrition label, but they behave very differently after you swallow them. Whey protein is absorbed faster. It is rich in an amino acid called leucine, which is one of the most powerful natural stimulators of GLP-1 release in the human gut. That is the very same hormone pathway that medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide target. In a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, patients with type 2 diabetes who consumed whey protein shortly before a meal saw their after-meal blood sugar spike drop by close to 28% compared to a control group. 28% from a spoonful of cheese eaten at the right time. In 100 grams of ricotta, you get about 174 calories, 11 grams of protein, only 3 grams of carbohydrate, and significantly less saturated fat than aged hard cheeses. For a patient who is managing both blood sugar and cholesterol, that combination is hard to beat. Let me tell you about Raymond, 71 years old, who had been living with type 2 diabetes for 12 years. He kept hitting what he called his afternoon crash around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Shaky hands, foggy head, and a desperate hunger that always sent him to the cookie jar. I asked him to swap that snack for half a cup of ricotta stirred with fresh herbs, a slice of whole grain toast, and a small handful of almonds. 6 weeks later, the crashes were gone, and his pre-dinner glucose readings were noticeably steadier. One tip from the kitchen. Plain ricotta has a mild, almost neutral flavor that puts a lot of people off the first time they try it. Stir in fresh basil, parsley, or chives, a pinch of salt, and a drizzle of olive oil. Suddenly, it tastes like something you actually want to eat. And now, the cheese I promised you at the very beginning, the one most people use only as a condiment, never realizing what it carries. Number 1 on my list is Parmesan. And I know that of every cheese I have mentioned so far, this is the one most people would never expect to see at the top of a diabetes-friendly list. But the science behind Parmesan is more robust than almost anyone realizes. And once you understand it, you will look at that little wedge in your refrigerator very differently. I am not talking about the powdered Parmesan in the green shaker can. I am talking about authentic aged Pararmio Reggiano imported from Italy, or a high-quality domestic aged Parmesan that has been ripened for at least 18 to 24 months. In 30 grams of that cheese, a small amount that would only ever be used as a topping, you get 8 grams of protein. 8 grams. That is more protein per gram than any other cheese on this list. The carbohydrate content is essentially zero. And because the long aging process breaks down nearly all of the lactose, even patients with mild lactose sensitivity tolerate it beautifully. But the real reason Parmesan claims the top spot is vitamin K2. Aged Parmesan carries one of the highest concentrations of vitamin K2 found in any animal source food on Earth. And vitamin K2, specifically the forms called MK4 and MK7, has growing evidence connecting it directly to how your pancreas releases insulin. A study published in the journal Diabetes Care, following more than 38,000 adults for an average of 10 years, found that higher intake of vitamin K2 was associated with approximately a 20% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. There is a second reason this matters for you. Vitamin K2 acts almost like a traffic director inside your body. It tells calcium where to go. With enough K2, calcium is guided into your bones and teeth where you actually need it. Without enough K2, calcium can quietly settle into the walls of your arteries and into soft tissue where it does real damage. For a person over 60 managing type 2 diabetes, that distinction is critical because diabetic patients carry a risk of arterial calcification 2 to 4 times higher than the general population. Let me tell you about Laura. 69 years old with prediabetes at an HbA1c of 6.2 and a recent diagnosis of osteopenia alongside early coronary calcification on her scan. A very common combination for women after menopause with prediabetes. I asked her to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of grated Parmigiano Reggiano, daily sprinkled over roasted vegetables and soups alongside her usual walking routine. 8 months later, her HbA1c was 5.7 and her bone density had stabilized. Use it as a finishing condiment. 1 or 2 tablespoons over salad, scrambled eggs, vegetable soup, or whole grain pasta. Massive flavor, 0 glycemic impact. Now you have the 5. But there is one more thing I need you to know before you walk into a grocery store. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. A cheese can be biochemically wonderful on paper, and you can still walk out of the supermarket holding a version of it that quietly works against your blood sugar. So before we close, let me show you the 3 traps I see my patients fall into again and again. The first trap is the individually wrapped American cheese slice, the kind that does not even need refrigeration on the shelf. I want to be honest with you, that product is not really cheese in any meaningful sense. It is a processed dairy compound containing modified starches, vegetable oils, emulsifiers, preservatives, and often a small amount of added sugar. It does not deliver the GLP-1 stimulation, the probiotic benefit, or the K2 content of real cheese. If you have been using these slices in your sandwiches, you are not getting any of the protection I just spent the last 20 minutes describing. The second trap is pre-shredded cheese in a bag. To keep it from clumping, manufacturers coat the shreds with cellulose powder and sometimes potato starch that adds 1 to 2 grams of hidden carbohydrate per serving, which most diabetics never count. The third trap is cream cheese. Not dangerous in small amounts, but the fat-to-protein ratio is poor. You get plenty of calories and very little of the protein leverage that makes the 5 cheeses on this list useful. The rule is simple. Read the ingredient list. If it is longer than milk, salt, Rennet, and bacterial cultures, put it back on the shelf. And 2 more things I owe you before we move on. If you are living with high blood pressure, heart failure, or chronic kidney disease, please be honest about your total sodium for the day when you increase cheese in your meals. Rinsing feta helps, but it does not solve everything. Watch your ankles in the evening. Watch your morning weight. Those are your early warning signs. And one more truth. Not every body responds to saturated fat the same way. A small group of patients will see LDL cholesterol climb noticeably, even when blood sugar improves. So if you increase cheese, please check a lipid panel about 3 months in and let the numbers tell you what your body actually prefers. Now let me bring all of this together so you know exactly what to do tomorrow morning. Here's what I want you to walk away with tonight. Cheese is not the enemy of a person living with type 2 diabetes. The wrong kind, the wrong portion, and the wrong timing are. When you choose mozzarella, you are feeding the bacteria in your gut that quietly support insulin sensitivity. When you choose cottage cheese, you are buying yourself 3 to 4 hours of freedom from the snack drawer. When you choose feta, you are bringing in a fat that helps shrink the dangerous fat hidden around your organs. When you choose ricotta, you are stimulating the same hormone pathway as the most advanced diabetes medications on the market. And when you choose aged Paraman, you are quietly protecting both your pancreas and your arteries with vitamin K2. So, here's what I want you to do this week. Walk into your grocery store and buy 2 cheeses, 1 tub of plain ricotta and 1 wedge of aged Parmigiano Reggiano. Those 2 alone will cover most of your meals. Next, change the order of your bites. Eat your cheese and vegetables first and save your bread, rice, or pasta for last. That single shift in sequence will lower your after-meal glucose spike more than almost anything else you can do at the table. Keep your portion to 1 or 2 thin slices or 2 to 4 tablespoons of the softer cheeses or 1 to 2 tablespoons of grated Parmesan. And the next time you check your blood sugar after a cheese-containing meal, do it twice, once at the 1-hour mark and again at the 3-hour mark. You will see things you have never seen before. If you want one question to ask your doctor at your next visit, ask whether your vitamin K2 status and bone density should be checked alongside your HbA1c, especially if you are a woman past menopause. Now, I have a question for you. Of these 5 cheeses, which one surprised you the most and which one is already sitting in your refrigerator tonight? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers genuinely help me understand what you are working with. And if you know someone over 60 who threw out their cheese the day they got their diagnosis, send them this video. They deserve to know exactly which ones to bring back, how much to use, and why. I am Dr. Lindsey Harrison. After more than 20 years walking alongside patients managing their blood sugar, I have learned that the people who thrive into their 70s and 80s are not the ones with the strictest restrictions. They are the ones who learn to choose well. Everything I share with you here is meant to support the care of your own doctor, never to replace it. Please do not adjust or stop any medication, whether metformin, insulin, or a GLP-1 agonist, based on a video. Bring these ideas to your next appointment and let your doctor walk through them with you. Take care of yourself. Eat with confidence. And if this channel has earned a small place in your week, tap subscribe before you go. I will see you in the next one.